fishing, it's in my soul.
Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Hello, Salt Strong Nation. Joe Simons, like diamonds. We are back. Got a whole crew here of panelists, not attendees, panelists. We had a few issues here with technology beforehand. Man, Zoom. It's keeping us alive, though, so we appreciate it. So we got Luke, Tony, Wyatt. What's up, dudes?
Go on.
Ready to talk lures today.
But not just any kind of lures, wintertime lures. Luke, what kind of lighting you got there, dude?
I don't know. It's all yellowish. I was just noticing that. This is like going old school retro styles. That's what it's looking like. Could be the beard. Like
yeah. When you went back, it actually corrected a little bit. It's recognizing the beard. This dude is retro. Zoom. That's what's happening. Zoom is putting some new features in there.
Pretty high tech.
Oh, all right. So who wants to start this puppy off? Talking about wintertime lures. And what does even winter mean? Is there a certain temperature, time of year?
Just the season. Season. So it's basically, just the cold spectrum. Everybody, like why it is, North Carolina's, it's a whole lot colder than it is here in Florida, but the fish are behaving the same way, right? They get out of the comfort zone. They're going to be doing the same behavior patterns. And maybe let's do one at a time. So I would say if I could only have one lure for the winter, and it didn't matter if it was because post cold front and like right during the cold front or like the day after is totally different than like 3 or 4 days after for me. But like one all around that I always trust is just the paddle tail, but the 3-inch paddle tail. I've still been doing great with this. This is an all around type thing, but the small one in particular with the 1/4 ounce jig head, if I could only have one lure, this would be it. So I'll start off with the elusive paddle tail.
That's a Slam Shady if you guys are listening and not watching.
Yeah, and this is the 3-inch that the Z-Man ones are back too, and so it's been a while since I've used them, and I've got them back on, and this exact one I totally crushed some trout the other day. I mean, it caught at least 30, 40 fish without changing it, and still in good shape. These things are bulletproof, so I've been really happy with these.
Yeah, I'll have to second that one, Luke. In fact, this is one that was catching a lot of fish the other day. It's my Slam Shady paddle tail on a little 1/8 ounce jig head here. And I think the reason I like these so much in the wintertime, and I'm not fishing anything bigger than 3-inch size, just because there's not a lot of bait fish present. And there are actually some shrimp, lots of shrimp present. And this profile does a great job, depending on how you fish it, of imitating either. And what's really great about the Z-Man material is that it sits on the bottom and it's buoyant. So that jig head goes down to the bottom and it just sits there and it's got just a slight amount of action. And, you talked about all the fronts, especially during a front or right after when those fish have really been stunned, like directly after a front. I find that those fish are really lethargic, and being able to put a lure in front of their face and just have it have such a subtle little action, even while it's not moving, it is really, really effective, especially for the redfish. For the trout, I find that I can still fish these paddle tails a lot like I do in the fall, kind of fast around those creek mouth points, things like that. It's just such a versatile bait. And a lot of times I will use this to find fish. But I will say there's another bait that I tend to use a lot in the wintertime, and that's a artificial shrimp. This one's a voodoo shrimp, but I'm testing out a lot of different ones here. Some ones that might even be working a little bit better than I'm holding here, but I just love the shrimp patterns in the wintertime just because you can fish them real slow. It's what's available for those fish. And I find that they're a lot of times holding a lot deeper, and the retrieve that you have with shrimp, unless you're using something like a DOA that's meant to be fished in current, typically is on a heavy jig head at the very bottom. So a lot of those fish are sitting at those really deep, stable temperatures, and that bait is right in their face, giving them the exact presentation they want. And it's what forage is available. So I tend to play around with the paddle tail and the shrimp a lot. I will always use the paddle tail first to find the fish, and then I will use the shrimp, just because you can cover so much more ground with. I mean, if I would try to search bait with those shrimp, it would just be really tough for me because it's a much slower presentation. But I find that I'm always going to go with the 1-2 punch on that paddle tail shrimp combo.
So before we go to Tony, I want to get an answer from you. Luke said 1/4, right? Jighead
or quarter ounce. Yeah.
Okay, or quarter ounce. I'm in the metric system here. And Wyatt, you said 1/8.
Yeah, so I'm sorry. I guess I need to elaborate on that more. Depending on the type of fishing that I'm doing, I'll play with the jig head. So if I'm up in the shallows looking for redfish, I'm going to go with 1/8 ounce jig head. I will also use the 1/8 ounce jig head if I'm trying to swing a paddle tail through a current area. Now, if you've watched any of my other tips earlier on in the year, if you're an insider, I was using this with a 1/4 ounce jig head because I wanted it to fish faster. In the wintertime, again, the fish are a little bit more lethargic. So I'm using a lighter jig head and adjusting my cast so that I'm not really having to do too much, but that bait is going to almost suspend and hang in that strike zone just a little bit longer, just to give those fish every opportunity that they need to strike. So I will use the 1/8 ounce jig head in those two scenarios, but if I'm fishing deep holes for redfish or flounder, I'm going to use a 1/4 ounce jig head all the way.
But Joe, with these jig heads, it's always about depth coverage too. So the quarter ounce kind of does it all, but I'll go to 3/8 ounce if I'm fishing like deeper docks, and so it's even the 1/8 if it's shallower water. So the key is just having the paddle tail or whatever soft plastic, and then having multiple steps of jig heads so that you can adjust it and control your depth. That's crucial. Tony, what you got?
So I'm a little different just because in the wintertime, that's when the water is the cleanest, and that's where I do the majority of my sight fishing. And it's usually, late morning into the middle of the afternoon where those fish are going to be pushed up shallow. So when you are fishing those, or you're going after those fish that are pushed up shallow, water's very clear. They're very aware of what's going on around them. They can see, they can feel, and they can hear everything. So I go a little bit lighter. I go with a weedless hook, like the Owner twist lock hook in the 1/16 ounce. If it's a little windier, or if I'm using a Z-Man bait, I'm going to go with the 1/8 ounce. And there is a trick to rigging those baits on this hook. We actually have a video for that. If you want to check that out, just go to saltstrong.com and search rigging Z-Man baits on Owner twist lock hook, and that should pop up. But I do also like to go with a paddle tail. Just recently, I've been using the Z-Man 4-inch Paddler Z in the Slam Shady color. We have that now in the Slam Shady color. I believe we sold out pretty quickly on the shop page, but we should be getting some more soon. But what I like about the Paddler Z compared, or the scented Paddler Z compared to like the Minnow Z or the Diesel Minnow, is that it has a smaller tail on there. So it doesn't kick as much. It doesn't cause as much vibration, especially when you're fishing shallow, clean water. You don't want a lot of vibration up there just because it will spook those fish. So something with a more subtle tail, but still gives a little bit of action, can definitely work really well. And then my other go-to would be a 4 or a 5-inch jerk shad, because it's more of a finesse presentation rigged up on one of those really light hooks, because when that lure hits the water, you don't want to create a lot of commotion, a lot of splash, because those fish will definitely pick up on it, and it will more than likely spook them rather than catch their interest.
Nailed it. And so, yeah, you actually beat me to my second lure and on the conditions aspect. So early in the morning when it's cold out, or after the fronts, I stick with the jig heads and keep it low. I keep it on the bottom in deeper water. But as Tony said, when those fish start creeping up, when the sun's out, like today, I just got back from an awesome trip. It was a textbook trip, and the sun came out around 10 o'clock. The water was low. And so I took, even with the bay boat, I got that boat up on the shallows, and I was sight fishing really nice trout and redfish with this jerk bait. So the same hook Tony was talking about. This is the 8 ounce jig, the eighth ounce weight, but the same. It works great with the 16th as well. And this is the Alabama Leprechaun. So the 5-inch split tail jerk bait. This thing is deadly. This is my go-to now for when it's calm and clear. And today was test. It was a textbook day. I caught multiple trout over 20 inches. I sight fished a redfish that was like 25 inches. And then early in the morning, right when it was cold, I wasn't on the flats. I was throwing a jig around docks and I caught a 30-inch snook. It was the textbook trip. It was perfect. And there's some fun videos. The whole thing was on film. The snook catch was crazy. It got around pilings and somehow got it out. But yeah, this is my 1-2 punch, right? I should go this way. So deep watter jig head, either paddle tail or a shrimp tail. And then in the shallows, this is hard to beat. And but we are the shrimp, the power prawn, why it started. So we've been testing this thing out, and this is definitely creeping up my favorites list. I just haven't had nearly as much time with it as those other lures. So I had to say those other lures first.
Yeah, the power prawn.
Power prawn's legit.
Yeah, I went out with you not too long ago. Cold front just came through. We fished the docks. I know we've had a lot of people have been asking, hey, I'm having trouble just catching fish. In the wintertime, at least from my experience, fishing some of these docks, there's usually always fish there. And the key, though, has been to hit the bottom. So that was why I wanted to bring that point up earlier, Wyatt, about the 1/8 versus 1/4, et cetera, because, and Luke, you nailed it too, right? There's different times of the day when you have the middle of the day and the sun's been hitting on some of these shorelines or muddy bottoms and the bait starts moving up. The big fish are going to start moving up as well. One, for the bait, and two, just to be in warmer water. But man, that power prawn, it gets bites, but you got to be on the bottom. Like, that's the one thing. Like, if you don't have a big enough jig head, you might as well just not be fishing.
Yeah. So having the jig head. So I always have this. This is my jig head little tackle box, and it has jig heads all the way from I guess a 1/16 is the lowest, and I'm getting kind of low. But this is my most important thing when I'm on the water. This is the most important. If I ever do change, which I rarely do, but if I am changing lures, is almost always a size of a jig head, going from like a 3/16 to a quarter, or even a quarter to a 3/8. That's all a big deal. It's a really big deal. So a lot of people go out, and I used to do it for many years. I would go out and I would have 10 packets of soft plastics in like one jig head, or like a pack of 1/4 ounce, or one, or even an 1/8 ounce is what I used to use all the time. And I would never change weights, and no telling how many missed opportunities I had because of that.
That brings up a good point too, just on how important presentation is in conjunction with the lure itself. You can throw all types of lures, but if you're not presenting it properly, you're not going to get a strike.
So Tony, on the shrimp, I know you've done a couple video things this year on gulp shrimp. Still using gulp shrimp, winter?
Oh yeah, that's like the perfect size, that 3-inch gulp shrimp on a jig head. Again, depending on how deep you're fishing, if you're going 4 feet or more, that's when I'll put on like either a 1/4 ounce or even a 1/8 ounce. Where I fish, we don't have much current, so I can get away with a 1/8 ounce in like 4 to 5 feet of water. And then if I'm sight casting the fish up in the shallows, I'll bump down to a 1/16. Works really good.
The gulp shrimp.
Sneaky shrimp.
Mm-hmm. They work.
Yeah, something about that scent is legit. I don't know what they have in there, but that's on my top list as well. A gulp shrimp, and the cool thing about it is you can be using the jig head, right? Same jig head. So what I like to do is I like to do the paddle tail gulp shrimp combo, because with this 1/4 ounce jig head, we'll just say this will cover with the paddle tail. Especially Z-Man paddle tail that floats. It'll cover like the 3 to 4 foot depth range really well. But if I want to go to 5 feet, right, if there's a deeper edge of docks, this just has a harder time going down. So I'll just keep the same lure on. I'll just quickly replace the tail, put a gulp shrimp there instead, which doesn't have this paddle, and it'll dive down at least another foot or so. So you can have the same tempo retrieve and now cover deeper water. So that's a little trick for just kind of going as a minimalist, where you don't want to be changing lures and stuff or changing lines and knots all the time. You can just go from a paddle tail to either split tail or like a shrimp, a little gulp shrimp pattern, and you can automatically get deeper.
Another thing I like about the gulp shrimp when I'm looking for redfish in the wintertime, if I have that rigged up, a lot of times I'll come across black drum when I'm looking for redfish in my area. And that gulp shrimp is like one of probably the top baits that I use for catching black drum on artificial. So if you happen to come across them, you don't have to switch lures. Just toss a gulp shrimp in front of them, let it sit there, just slowly drag it when they get close. That's how I usually catch them.
Yeah, the only problem, and this happened today, is that their material changed years ago, and it really made me mad. But they're much more. They're weaker. So like this was just a pinfish. So a pinfish took the tail off, but even still, it catches fish, right? As long as it's rigged properly and it has a good darting motion, even without the tail, fish will hit it. I've got some of my best fish with just little nubs like this, and they'll come up and smack it.
Why don't you show the strength of the power prawn, Luke? Show the strength. Show the strength.
Yeah, this is the power prawn, and yeah, I mean you could really put some pressure in that puppy, and it is strong. And so another thing too on depth coverage, I've recently, since starting using this power prawn, I've been doing a lot of dock fishing, and I've actually gone up to a 1/2 ounce jig head, and I'm really liking it. And particularly for fishing like the 5 to 10 foot depth range, that extra weight just helps get down there, but it's actually working surprisingly good in shallower water too, like 3 to 4 feet of water, as long as there's not seagrass or oysters or rocks, because then we get snagged. But if it's just sand, just that thing beating on that sand, it seems to actually trigger some action, like big fish too. My average fish size seems to increase when I'm using this power prawn with the heavier jig head. I don't know what it is about it. Again, it's still fairly new on using them, but I've been extremely impressed with it.
Yeah, and for those of you listening, I know we had a request just right before this about, hey, when are you guys getting these things in? Well, first and foremost, these are the Brazilian, power prawns. We got this idea from one of our insider members, Marcos, who is from Brazil, and this is what they catch those monster robalo on. I'm talking like some of the biggest snook you've ever seen in your life. And we went fishing in June or whatever that was, to kind of test them out ourselves. And that was when we kind of like, all right, we now believe this is the real deal. So we've been testing them now for now on month 7. And then a lot of it's just testing the jig heads, because that's a really critical part of it. Because if it's not rigged, just like Tony mentioned, if you have bad presentation, it's just not really going to work. And so we finally kind of cracked the code on the best jig heads. We had to try out a ton of them, and they will be available this month, like meaning depending on when you're listening, but sometime by the end of January, it may be worst case first week of February, but it's only going to be for insider members. We're going to have limited supplies because we're obviously importing these over. So we are going to only have these available for insider members for the foreseeable future. I don't plan on changing that. And of course, members will still get 20% off, just like they do everything at fishstrong.com. So Luke, Wyatt, Tony, y'all made a great point. Besides getting your power prawns, go buy a bunch of jig heads. I mean, that to me was one of those aha moments too I did the same thing you're talking about, Luke. I would have one. I was like, hey, 3/16, that should work for everything. I'll just let it sink a little bit more. No, like you need to have every single size out there. Just like you see the bass guys, they have 15,000 different weights and split shots and bullet weights. I mean, it's just the smallest little fraction can make a really big difference in terms of how that bait or lure looks underwater.
Absolutely. I would say another big thing about choosing your jig heads is thinking about what species you're going after. For me, when I'm going after redfish, they're primarily feeding on the bottom. I'm not fishing in, my paddle tails or my shrimp or anything like that mid column. When I'm looking for my reds, I'm bouncing it with a 1/4 ounce jig head, sometimes even up to a 3/8, just because I know that they're actively searching along that bottom. They're going to feel the vibration of, like Luke said, that big jig head hitting the mud or the sand. And I actually had some really good success. I know I talked about the voodoo shrimp earlier. This is a nice heavy jig right here. And this hit in the bottom, I mean, it fires those fish up because they can feel those vibrations in their lateral lines. And it really helps them zero in on that bait, especially if you're fishing murky water like I am in the Carolinas. But, on the flip side of the coin, fishing lighter jig heads in current really helps you give another natural presentation of a bait fish that's being swept with the current. So I completely agree with that statement. You need to have a lot of different jig heads for different scenarios, thinking about, trout aren't going to be sitting directly on the bottom feeding, at least I don't see a lot of that in my area. So lighter jig heads that stick a little bit longer in the middle of the column tend to produce more trout for me, 3/16, 1/8, things like that, just because I've got deeper water that I want to kind of stay in that strike zone with.
Yeah, and another big reason that the Brazilians don't ever pre-rig their shrimp, no offense, Voodoo or DUA, but that's the dumbest thing ever, just because of what we're talking about, right? They have one good shrimp body they know works, and they don't ever pre-rig it. They have different jig heads to go in and out, and that's why the material is so tough. You could re-rig that thing 1,000 times. What would end up happening is if a bluefish or a mackerel, maybe even a really aggressive ladyfish caught the wrong way, or a jack is going to rip that tail off. It should still work, is not going to work as well as it would with the tail. But that's a big reason they have that crazy tough material, so you can keep re-rigging it based on the depth you're fishing. Because that first time we fished one, right? Like we went offshore, like we went chasing snook on some of the wrecks, 10 plus miles out, and we're talking 20 feet of water using the same shrimp. And then we go inshore and we started catching redfish and trout and snook in shallow waters, and same shrimp. We just take out the jig head and moved it down. So that is one of the cons about some of these pre-rigged shrimp. Although what's the typical size you get, Wyatt, on like a Voodoo or DUA?
Yeah, and my big complaint with the Voodoo is they don't have very big shrimp. So this is I think this might be the biggest one that it's like 3.75 inches. And especially when I'm going after bigger redfish, this is the perfect size. This is exactly what those really hunt. We talk about how big fish need big baits.
For a lot of people listening, what are you holding up there?
So that is the power prawn. Sorry.
Oh, snap.
The power prawn. Nice. It's a very nice big shrimp profile. I mean, the kind of shrimp you're going to order at a restaurant with a cocktail. Perfect size profile for a really hungry bull redfish. Just because you think about those fish, they're lethargic. They're going to take up a high calorie meal versus chasing around a bunch of these smaller shrimp that are more difficult to zero in on, that are moving really fast. Those larger shrimp just provide a much better meal for those fish to go after. So I would prefer to use larger shrimp. When I did use gulp shrimp, had to stop using them. I was spending way too much money on those packs. They work really well, but in the wintertime, I was using 4 and 5 inch gulp shrimp just because that's what the big redfish wanted. So I'm excited to keep putting these power prawns to the test. And I mean, it's exactly what I'm looking for in shrimp bait.
If Fat Albert goes to a buffet, what's he going to grab? The small little shrimp or the big prawns? Fat Albert is going to grab the prawns. Go with the prawns for the big fish.
And for those listening, so the power prawns, this first iteration, the length is I believe it's 4 3/8 inches. So it's a lot bigger than the typical gulp shrimp or those Voodoos that you mentioned. I have been testing out a smaller version as well, and it is working. That's what I sight fishing some triple tail with. I prefer that bigger one. You can cast it further for the shallows, but there's a smaller one that is working. But my go-to is just for the same reason Wyatt said, that bigger baits equals bigger fish. The same premises in the winter as well.
Well, like you said, it just seems to get bigger every time we've gone side by side. Where I'm fishing, let's just say Z-Man paddle tail, I'll get fish, but you're catching these just big fish, same area. It's crazy that the size of the fish that thing attracts. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I've been very impressed. Super impressed to the point where I went multiple months where that was all I was using. But granted, I was testing a bunch of jig heads and stuff, but I've been blown away.
Yeah, the customizability, is that a word?
Yeah.
Of these shrimp is pretty cool too. I actually put a rattle in them. I don't know if you can hear that, but it has a little cavity in the head that you could put a little glass rattle into if you need to, if the water's really dirty. So that
was supposed to be top secret, Tony. Come on now. You're telling everyone about that?
We're trying to save that for later. But yeah, that was, again, another reason why we tested out a bunch of different profiles. And this one has it all, where it's tough material. You can rig it weedless, and it has that rattle cavity as well. It's like the perfect size for those rattles that a lot of the fly fishermen use. You can get them in most stores.
Yeah, talk about that, Tony. We were kidding around. But this is the first time people are hearing about it. So talk about, where did you get the rattles? How did you insert them? What's the trick?
Yeah, so the rattles, I got them at Academy actually a while ago. I was using them to put into like other soft plastics where you have to actually, stick a screwdriver in just to make a little cavity and then put the glass rattle in. But you can get them at like Bass Pro Shops, all sorts of stores, and they're just a little glass tube. Some of them are glass, some of them are plastic. The glass tends to give out a little better of a rattle because it's metal beads bouncing against glass as opposed to plastic, which sort of absorbs the beads bouncing against them. So you don't get as much of a noise, but the little cavity, it's right in the head. And these little glass tubes, they have a pointed end. So you stick that pointed end into the cavity and then just start pinching it through and it'll go right into that cavity. And some other shrimp actually come pre-rigged with rattles in them. Let's see, where is it? I have a chase bait shrimp that comes with a rattle inside.
Couldn't even hear that, Tony. That's laughable.
And put it at the other one.
That's cool.
And what I was testing out some of the rattles, and it seems like sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing though. So that's again another reason why it's good to customize. Like when it's clear water and calm conditions, I was noticing fish spook off from the rattles. It seems like it was just too much vibration. That's why I really like these, call them the silent but deadly kind of jerk baits, where there's no paddle that's created a lot of vibration. There's no rattles. It just has really good looking motion in the water. And the same premise seems to be the case with these shrimp too. If it's calm and clear, I will actually take the rattles out and just go the natural, non-vibration. But when it's windy or the water's murky, like in White and Carolinas, where the water's always pretty dark, rattles can be a huge benefit. Very, very big benefit. So just keep that in mind, where it's a lot of it's situational. And again, that's a cool way. Another reason why it's good to be able to modify your stuff when you get to like a clear patch versus a murky patch. Switching on and off the rattles is helpful.
I think one of the other awesome things about the power prawn is the segmented tail. That's something that another reason I've ditched the gulps, and I don't typically use DOAs. There's only one scenario and I'll use them for, and it's fishing current for trout. But the segmented tail, I believe, is another big thing too. I feel like any kind of motion or any extra vibration you can get, especially in murky water, like Luke mentioned, I'm in the Carolinas. And that's, I guess, why I like the Voodoo, but it's not terribly segmented. And even on the chase baits, which is, probably the most expensive artificial shrimp out there, it's got like one small segment on the end of the tail. This thing moves, man. It's like, it's got, and with the ability to add a rattle, it's for everything I've looked for in a shrimp. So, how much better does the power prawn get?
How much of the chase bait shrimp now?
I want to say like $12. Tony, you probably know more than I do.
Yeah, they retail about $10 for the 3.73 or 4 inch that it is. They also have a bigger one that's I believe 5 or 6 inch. That one's a little more.
Yeah, one I've been testing out is the old Live Target Fleen. Is it called the Fleen shrimp? Yeah, Fleen.
Oh, you rig it backwards technically? Yeah,
check it. I think you can see that price tag or not with my camera, but $10.99 for. But it came with, it has a jig head and it has two bodies. It looks cool, but I was actually doing a lure test. It was gulp shrimp versus this today, and gulp shrimp won. But it works. Both of them caught fish. But I mean, it's just $11 for a soft, like one soft plastic lure is a little expensive. But this one does have rattles too. Barely hear it. But again, that's a lot of the premises. It's not just one lure is going to catch fish, while others don't. It's really about putting yourself in the right spot at the right time. Like if you can do that properly, you'll be able to catch fish with all these lures we talked about and others that we haven't. So that's number one. And then if you can just get yourself in a good spot and then select the right type of lure for the conditions, then your odds are going to get even better, where you can go out there and really crush them.
I wish there was one place that would teach all that.
Me too.
No, the Insider Club. Hi. If you guys haven't joined us, come on. What are you waiting for? The whole point of it, if you guys are listening and haven't joined, It's everything that we wish was around when we were inconsistent. And that doesn't mean we were beginners or noobs. It was just we weren't as consistent as we wanted to be. And if that's you, then you should probably take a look at it. And it's for people that value their time and money, ultimately. And what I mean by that is we try to shorten the learning curve. Every single week, we're just putting tips out there and then curating everything we're seeing from this big network of now almost 20,000 members in our community. And Luke, every single Friday does a weekly game plan, 10 minutes or less, and he's literally telling you exactly what he just said, what types of spots, what types of depth, what types of jig head sizes, like here's what you want to be doing this weekend. We do it every single weekend, week in and week out, just to help you out, just to shorten the learning curve and give you a massive advantage so that when you hit the water, you have a game plan, you know exactly where you're supposed to go. You have everything outlined versus the guy or gal like us for many years that just was kind of winging it and guessing and, oh, I might try this. And then all of a sudden you get to your spot and someone's already there. And now you're like a lost kid at Disney. So that's the whole point. And the second part, what it's kind of evolved into on top of the premium education is now some of the discounts, right? We talked about things like the Power Prom. We're going out and Slam Shady, which is a registered trademark that we created. These are all things that we're going out based on the water experience and feedback from our members on things that just absolutely work, and then giving them to you at a lowest price you can get anywhere. And now rods, reels, all kinds of great stuff. Then of course the community, which is a place that we're spending time in every single week, every single day. And now it seems like there's a new report. What do you guys think? Every 4 to 5 minutes? I mean, it's nuts. It used to be like every hour there's a new report. Now it's like every 4 to 5 minutes. It's crazy.
Yeah, and this is anglers really across the Southeast. From Florida is the majority, or at least that's a little over. It's like 60% Florida now, or like it was like 58 or something. And in Texas, we have a lot of members in Texas, and then all in between along the Gulf, and then all the way up the Atlantic, up to New York. It's really anybody who likes catching redfish, sea trout, snook, flounder. It is the ultimate place. You can meet good people, and no matter how experienced you are, if you start as a beginner, you're not going to be a beginner very long. When you go through the lessons, the courses that come with it, and then just seeing the weekly game plans and the weekly insider reports where you can see the lessons in action, like on the water, real time, and just replicate it. That's all you have to do is just replicate what you're seeing from us and from other members in the community. It is I learn a ton just going through that community platform with so many just anglers who like helping other anglers. It's impossible not to learn some really helpful tips.
Yep. And now we got our boy Tony doing spot dissections. Every week he goes in and just picks a new spot based on our members, based on new members, based on people saying, hey, I'm going to be fishing here in, Biloxi or Fort Myers or Corpus Christi, whatever it is. And he goes in there and gets on online maps and dissects it. So if you love this free content, you should see what we have on the other end in terms of all the mini courses. And even now, 3 of our mastery courses we give for free to all members. Spot dissections, the weekly game plans, and now even insider reports where we go out and fish a new spot every single week and show you what lures or live bait we're using, show you everything, including where we launched, where all the fish were caught, where fish were missed. It's just something you can't get out there anywhere else. So sorry to turn this into a pitch for the Insider Club, but I know we have so many people that email us like, oh man, I love what you guys do, and I just still haven't joined yet. And I'm like, well, what should we do? Should we put a 365-day money-back guarantee? Oh, wait, we have that. So we're making it a complete no-brainer. And we're so passionate about it because we see the difference this makes. Like we get the testimonials every single day. There are new testimonials, new reports coming and saying, guys, thank you so much. This truly does work in Texas, in Florida, in Louisiana, in the Carolinas, in Georgia, in Mississippi, and everywhere in Virginia and everywhere in between. It does work, and it will save you so much time, and now it'll save you a ton of money as well on all the discounts, and just helping avoid the stuff that just doesn't work. Because there's a lot of stuff out there that, looking back, and Luke's got some behind him. I've got a bunch of rods and tackle behind me. If you guys watching this, so much of this stuff, like, man, I never should have bought that. I should have just stuck to what I know works based on proven trends and proven fishing reports. So a lot of it is trying to save you from yourself and ultimately just give you shortcuts.
Yeah. Save money on that, and you'll save money, wasting gas driving around in your boat trying to find out where the fish are.
Yep.
Sure, a bunch of people burn through a whole tank of gas in a trip just trying to find a good spot.
Oh, yeah. Or having to rely on live bait. That was another big thing. It's not that we're against live bait. We have a ton of live bait tips. We all four of us here use it. But, man, there is something neat about putting the focus on finding the fish, which is the most critical part, right? Luke mentioned earlier. And then once you know where the fish are, you can use whatever you want. And once you get over that hump of not having to rely on live bait, which is what we did for many years, and not having to lug around a casting or worry about your aerators, or especially if you're kayak fishing or wade fishing, it makes no sense. But the freedom and the control it gives you to go out there and catch an inshore slam on a lure, and the confidence, doggone. I remember that first time I did, I was like, holy smokes, I didn't think this was possible. And now it not to say it's easy, but it becomes a whole lot easier to have some of your best days ever, just because you're able to cover a lot of ground and put your lure in front of as many fish as possible, which is the ultimate game.
Yeah, and we had a talk. This obviously was focused on lures, but we wouldn't be doing justice if we didn't talk about the Insider Club, because if you are struggling to catch fish, 99% sure that it's not because of the lures you're using. Again, if you can just get yourself in the feeding zones, if you can identify and predict where those feeding zones are going to be based on the conditions, you got it. Like, you can be throwing junk lures and you're still going to catch fish. Yep. So if you're struggling now, you're looking for new lures, I would say before you go out and buy a bunch of lures, just try it out. We have the guarantee there. It's there for a reason, because we just want to make sure we know it's going to help you out, and we just want to make sure that you're not nervous or think you're gonna be wasting money because you literally can't. If you don't think it's awesome, you just let us know and we'll give you money back. It's that simple, because and we'll help you choose the right lures. We'll help you dodge some of the nice looking fancy $11 lures and use some much more affordable stuff that works just as good, if not better, in many cases.
Yep. Cool. Anything else, guys? I know we got some wade fishing stuff we're going to be filming here shortly in a few minutes. So for our Insider members. So anything else before we close up, gents?
That I can think of.
Get out there and fish. Wintertime was the time I used to think the fish were too cold, they weren't going to be eating, and I was totally wrong. It's now one of my favorite seasons. The water's clear, as Tony said. You can be sight fishing today. I sight fished a nice red out of a 24-foot bay boat. It's awesome. Well, if you can get out there, and don't let a little cold weather keep you from getting out in the water.
Yep. And once you find them, you found them.
Oh, yeah.
Cool. All right, guys. Well, if you're not a member, check us out, saltstrong.com. If you are a member, thank you guys so much. You're the foundation of this company, of our family. We appreciate you big time, and we have some really, really exciting things besides the Power Prawn. Some really cool stuff on all three fronts, meaning the premium education, the online community, and the discounts coming your way here in 2021. So stay tuned. You will be definitely wowed this year. I'm really pumped for you guys to see it. So a lot of cool stuff. Thank you guys, and we'll see you on the next episode. Peace. We out.
There you go.
Easy.
'Cause fishing, it's in my soul. It was passed down to me from the days ago. Find us on the water if there was a way. It's been said my papa, he wrote the book on catching big reds and 20-pound snook. I wish I knew all the things he knew today. For he's the reason why we are this way. And he put fishing